Well, it's good to see all of you as we gather this day for our second session on ethics. What an exciting topic and what an exciting conversation we had last week. Especially, I say exciting because ethics can be one of those things that's like, well, it's ethics. But we had an engaging conversation last week, as all of you know, and I'm glad to welcome most of you back. I know we had a couple who couldn't be here for part two. Again, this is a two-part session. So I think the survey went out for the first part, which gets your 1.5 or 1.5 CCE units. Today, we were having the second half of that, and you'll be getting a survey again in a few days with the link to the video as well as a survey so you can get those CCE unit certificate. And as a reminder, this is a three-part series, 2 on ethics and 1 on the coaching agreement. And our friend Ann will be here again next Tuesday. So it's the Ann trifecta. Is that the Ann as we come together for these 3 sessions here for Ann to be with us. And again, I do want to mention that usually we don't have, as I mentioned last week, we don't have a presenter who was in a previous year in the following year. But Ann was so phenomenal last year with her improvisation thing for those who were here. And she's just great with ethics. So I'm going to go ahead and give an introduction. I'm saying this only even though most of you know her. I'm going to say the introduction again for, as I mentioned to Ann, for those who might watch the YouTube video later on and want to know, and maybe only watch part 2, so they know who is this person, Ann. So I didn't mention last week that Ann is a PCC, a professional certified coach. I don't think I gave your credential. What is that CMC, by the way, Ann, after your name?
Oh, thank you. Certified Mentor Coach.
That's what I thought it was. I didn't want to assume anything else. So Ann has volunteered on the ICF Ethics education team, successfully updating their 3-hour online course to reflect the revised Code of Ethics that happened, 2020 to 2021. She serves as the final performance review examiner for a level 1 coach training organization. She graduated from the ICF's updated PCC marker assessor trainings and the ACC bars training. She has created and teaches the CCEs program, and that's been since 2021, and which is a 20-hour ICF accredited coach training program that includes in that program 10 hours of mentoring with our certified mentor coach, Ann. She has mentored new and recertifying coaches since 2016. She has taught multiple CCE courses each year since 2014. She has been coaching continuously for 20 years. Since 2003. So that's a good track record, my friend, to be in this business. And she has served for 10 years as a volunteer for the ICF Metro DC chapter, including 3 years as the chapter's group mentor coach. And she has 30 plus years experience as a certified trainer and facilitator to adult learning. And she lives and works, as she mentioned in the chat room, in beautiful Frederick, Maryland, with a fabulous husband, garden, and one, I like what you said here, one good dog out of 2. And again, I'm going to see if I can hold up that picture. I don't know if it's going to come in clear or not. I think I can't. There we go. Try to do that clear. So yeah, there we go. There we go. So kind of, there we go. Kind of. There's the 2 dogs. So again, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our dear friend, Ann, and take it away.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back here with Orange County Chapter. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and be a coaching ethics nerd with you. I really do appreciate that opportunity. I want to start today. Is there anyone here who was not in the group 1 week ago? Anybody miss part 1? Okay, Jennifer, all right. We got you covered, Jennifer. That's fine. That's fine. So we're going to begin in honor of Jennifer. We're going to recap what did you take away from last week. We covered a lot. So Jennifer, you're just going to be a sponge and you'll absorb what happened in the first half of ethics. So in a moment, you'll break away into breakout rooms. However you'd like to phrase it, I'll put a little placeholder in the chat box. Here's what I recall from Ethics 1 is going to be what I'll put in there. But here's what stuck with me. Here's what puzzled me. Here's what interested me. Here's what I've been thinking of ever since. Here's what I've tried with some of my clients. Here's what I researched and looked at a little bit more. All of those are appropriate. All of those are appropriate. Whatever you would like in your groups of, I think we have about 5 in your
And
groups.
just
Yeah.
quickly, Ann, we do have 2 others who weren't here last week. So it looks like we have
Oh,
3. I think I
my
saw in the
God.
chat room, Brenda as well as Angela weren't here last week. So we do have a
wasn't.
couple. So,
I
you know,
wasn't either.
oh my
Okay.
goodness. Okay, we have quite a few. So in those breakout rooms, it's a great chance to share with each other some of the learnings you learned last week. So didn't mean to interrupt you, Ann.
Exactly. And then part of what you bring back to the group. So in a moment, we'll go into breakout rooms. Here's what I took away from week 1, and you may have someone in the group who was not there, so you're sharing with them. Here's what I took away from week 1. That's your focus. You don't need to go any farther. Unless you want some of my bogus bonus points, which are not good for anything, but they feel really good, earning them. If you have time, and if you feel like we've really covered everything we could remember that we wanted to pull out of that first week, then your second topic could be, what would we like to talk about today? What would we like to talk about today in the session we have coming up? So your main focus, here's what I took from last week for you individually. Just think about you, what's of interest to you. Others who weren't there will pick up and glean information from the group. But for you, what did you take away? And if there's time, I sure hope today they spend some time on this topic. That's your number 2. What questions do you have on what you'll do in your breakout groups? Around 4 or 5 people, about 7 minutes. What questions do you have? No? Okay, I think we are ready for our breakout group wizard to work some magic, and I'll drop into the groups and say hello. Very good. All right, Brian. Thank you.
Should I pause the recording, right?
Yes, please.
And again, our facilitator, our presenter, Ann.
All right. I got to pop in on some of the groups, and what I'd like to hear first, if you would please, is what did if your group got that far, I want to give you your bonus points. And what would you like to talk about today if you got that far? That was your second question. So which groups would like to share? Here's what we hope we get to talk about today. You can shout it out, put it in the chat.
I'm willing to share if. Shall I go ahead? Okay. I was the one who brought forward. My question is something I would like to find out about is related to group coaching. And it's something that I'm just beginning as of this month. And I'm wondering what might be different. I know that the Code of Ethics is not going to be different. I mean, those will all be, those guidelines are in place. I'm just wondering what, if anything, different may come forward relating to ethics and coaching with groups, or just I guess I'm maybe even looking for some any experiences that others have had that may be something I need to be aware of as I begin group coaching around ethics, because there's more than one person now, and we're all together sharing information.
Thank you, Jennifer. I will go by a couple of those. There's a scenario we have that I could make a case fits in with what I'm dealing with multiple people. Before I forget, though, I just want to mention there are ethical standards. They may not use the word standard, but there are ethics in place. Did you know, for your board members, your chapter? Did you know that there are a set of ethical agreements? I need to get better at this language, but written specifically for chapters. And I think this is like a 50-50. I wouldn't swear to this. The same for group coaching. I know there's a specialty now in group coaching. So it'd be interesting to go there and look and see if they have some ethical considerations built into, I think it's a certification you can get in group coaching. It'd be very interesting to see if they have an ethical piece there. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. And we'll see about, I may have a scenario I may dedicate to Jennifer. Yeah, Karen.
First of all, just appreciate you, Anne, for sharing your wisdom with us all, and ICF Orange County for always doing such a great job of curating these kinds of conversations. What I'm curious about, and I know it's not till next week, but our future was, could we talk more about the coaching agreement? And because several of us in our breakout can't be here next week. So anyway, that's kind of where everything's leading, because it seemed like that was a really strong takeaway for all of us, that the coaching agreement is really, really important.
Thank you, Karen. This is great. Daryl, this is wonderful because everybody's leading right into, Daryl, would you talk for a moment just about the YouTube channel that the chapter has, and that's a resource.
Yeah, I will certainly do that. Yeah, we do have ICF Orange County has a YouTube channel for the presenters. Not all presenters allow us to record them, so we honor that if they want to record it or not. But so we do have things on the website, the YouTube channel, so that will include the coaching agreement. So it'll be up probably a couple weeks after we record it next week. So feel free to do that, and as well as looking at other things. I think even Anne's event from last year is on there as well. So and the ethics one from part 1, for those who weren't here last week, for the 3 who weren't here last week, you'll be able to go to that channel and view that. Just keep in mind, though, you only get CCE units when you do this live, so you can't watch it, after the fact or whatever and get the CCE units, but you'll still get the 1.5 today attending today. But for the coaching agreement, again, just be on the lookout for that, Karen, in maybe a couple of weeks, and it'll be on the YouTube channel.
And the learning is there. The learning is there. And the bonus points, you let me know. I'll send you some bonus points in the mail. I'm bad with bonus points. Thank you, Karen. So the coaching agreement for sure, 1 week from today, same time, same place. We're going to talk about the coaching agreement. Let me interrupt myself. The topic is still, what did you want to know more about? Who remembers the 3 rules the ethics expert Michael Marks gave that related, what is the cause of most ethical problems? Phyllis, do you remember the 3 rules? And if you would, share them verbally with us.
Well, so actually where I was going was the 3 things you mentioned about the contracts. So sorry, I jumped in too quickly there with my woo. That was one of the big takeaways for me.
Well, share that. Well, it'll work in the conversation, I'm sure. What were those 3? I have lots of 3s.
So the primary, and Greg actually said this best when we were talking about it, but the 3 biggest issues around ethical violations are lack of a coaching agreement, a bad coaching agreement, or a poorly explained coaching agreement.
That's me hitting the nail on the head.
So yeah. Let's go look at our coaching agreements.
Yeah. Exactly. The remedy is there, the solution is there. And for some of us, it's been too long since we looked at our coaching agreements. I got a coaching agreement when I went to my ACTP in 2005. I didn't change it for 10 years, probably. I was busy figuring out the phone. Stephanie, did you have a question?
I did. A poorly explained coaching agreement. I would love to know more about that, either today or next week. Like how much do you go into it with your client? At what point do you go into it with your client? What's a good explanation and what's a poor explanation?
That is very much a big part of our agenda in 1 week. Absolutely. Because so many of us work in isolation. It's nice to be able to look over, oh, you have a flexible policy on that, or oh, you do this, or you have that. I would like to incorporate that, or I'm happy to share how I do business with you. So absolutely, next week, if you have your paper coaching agreement, print it and bring it. Print it and bring it.
I have a question, Ann. This is Susan Howington. Is the dispute around a coaching engagement, is that primarily coming from an individual who is having an issue with the coaching arrangement or the corporation? Because I've never had a corporation who's my client disagree with our agreement. So I don't know. Is it usually an individual if the coach is coaching an individual, or does anyone have any thoughts on that or opinions on that? Where does the disagreement come from generally?
I have information on that's perfect, Susan. I thank you all. This is perfect because what I want to do now is talk about and show you. We talked about how people get in trouble. No coaching agreement, a bad coaching agreement, a poorly explained coach. That's how. What are they doing that gets them in trouble? Is it an individual? Is it an organization? Was Susan's question. But what are people doing? And the way I think of this, I hope you don't think less of me. But it's kind of like you're there in the checkout line, the grocery store. It says so-and-so's divorcing so-and-so, or was picked up by UFOs or whatever. And part of you wants to read it. Part of me wants to go, what got them in trouble? Just tell me what got them in trouble so I don't do that. Well, it doesn't work exactly that way because the field of ethics is huge. And knowing a couple of mistakes is probably not going to benefit me much. But it's interesting. It's interesting. Let's go to that now. What I'd like to do, but before I do that, I want to find out from other groups, what would you like to talk about today? Did every group get a chance to say, here's what our group hopes we'll touch on today? Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to start with the last question, which with Susan's permission, I'm going to reframe slightly to what gets people in trouble. What gets people in trouble?
Perfect.
So every year, the ICF puts out an ethical conduct and compliance report. This may have just come out last week because I looked for it last week and did not find it. So I thought, oh, I guess, they haven't put it out yet, and looked for it again. And here it is, the 2022. I'm going to show you some parts of this report, and then we're going to compare pie charts from 2018, 19, 20, and 21. And we're going to see how the ethical problems have morphed even over the last 5 years. There's been quite a dramatic change in those. So I think that will, and then further down in the report, and we'll actually look at that, I think are about 8 or 10 redacted instances where the committee did look at this and they've issued a finding or it's still pending, but that gets into the actual weeds. This is available to you. I want to give a shout out to Fran Fisher. Who knows Fran Fisher, MCC, wonderful coach. She said something in advanced mentor training I took with her last year, that she will frequently Google what she's looking for on the ICF website. The search engine leaves a little to be desired, but I thought, I don't know about Googling that. Well, this morning I knew I'd seen the 2022. I could not find it on the ICF website. So guess what I did? I Googled 2022 Ethical Conduct and Compliance Report. Brought me right to the page on the ICF website. So now I'm a fan. If you don't find what you're looking for, just a little free tip, maybe Google exactly what you're looking for. And like Fran said, here it is. So I won't go through everything, but this will summarize complaints received via the ethical conduct review process. Now, the first thing I imagine they're going to ask is the coach that you have a problem with. Are they a member of the ICF? I would think that's the first question. Because if the answer is no, the complaint's not going anywhere, not with the ICF. So if you're an ICF coach and someone has a complaint, and they'd say, yeah, they are an ICF member. The board, this is Susan McMahon, who I mentioned came up with the interpretive statements that are now the considerations and incident, something. It has a new name now, where it gives you a great deal more information about every one of the ethical standards, because we need more information. We need more information. Some of them are one sentence, and we need more information. Michael Marks is on there. I've mentioned him a lot. And Gürkan in Turkey. Both of them, this entire team worked on the Code of Ethics. But I want to share something that Michael and Gürkan both said. They said, we have not memorized the standards. And that was a great relief to me, because if you ask me what number 17 is, I don't know. And you don't need to know either. But if you know how to find it, if you know how to find the code, and you remember reading something in there, if somebody gives you an affiliate fee when you refer someone, and you go, there's something in there about that, about me having to declare that. I don't know what number it is. Then you can go right back and find it. So just a little bit of relief for us that, no, we don't have to memorize the standards. We just know the resources, where to go and where to find them. Trademarks, I'll just mention, that's of course very big. I don't know how artificial intelligence is going to have its fingerprints on this, but trademark issues has its separate category within the ICF. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth there. ICF accredited providers are people like me who create a training program and ask that it be accredited by the ICF. If you take an accredited training program and you have any ethical considerations or concerns about that, you have recourse. You have recourse through the ICF. These are the items that showed up. And again, this is not one-on-one coaching. These are accredited training providers. Maybe you took a class and you thought the advertisements didn't really match the class. Or I thought I could unsubscribe from that and it was difficult. But there's a separate category for accredited providers. Earlier, we mentioned groups. Again, it would be interesting to go to the group coaching certification and see if they have some ethics work. This is where I want to focus, though. We'll take a quick look here. These are different sites where complaints had come in last year, in 2022. And now we're going to look at that pie chart. I hope everybody could see that. Give me a thumbs up. You see that? All right. So a couple of things here. 21 complaints. There are something like 53,000 ICF certified coaches in the world. and more than that, members of the ICF. So your odds of winding up on this page seem to be pretty small, I would say. 21 formal complaints out of 53,000. So fairly low odds. I want to go back to one of the names I mentioned on the previous page, Gürkan, who was on the ethics team from Turkey. And when I mentioned that number to him, he said he had a theory of why it was so low. He said, do all of our coaching clients, and this is my question for you right now, do all of your coaching clients, sponsors, clients, everyone, know that if they have any ethical issues with you, they have recourse through the ICF? Do they know? Do they know? That was his question. Maybe that contributes to how low the numbers are. We'll see. What I thought I would do is go back and forth just for a moment. I'd like to show you 2018 side by side with 2022, just to see the transformation. So 2022, let's start with conflict of interest. Last year, conflicts of interest made up less than 5% of the complaints that made it all the way through the ICF process. This is the 2018 chart, 26%, 5 times higher. I don't know exactly what changed. I don't know exactly what changed. But conflicts of interest, which were always very high, I think they were even a third at one point earlier, suddenly dropped to below 5%. Interesting. Interesting. 2022, confidentiality, also 4.8. Very low. Very low. Might be something I'd think of right away with a ethical breach. In 2022, confidentiality less than 5%, 18%. So over 3 times that number in 2018. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I have some suspicions, but I don't know. The largest area in 2022, inappropriate conduct, which I don't even think shows up in the previous. And 3/4, when we look at 2022, 3/4 of that, inappropriate conduct or misrepresentation of self or service. This is the most recent information we have. Inappropriate conduct or misrepresentation of self or services. One final look at 18, general business disputes. So I don't know if some of those are rolled in to a new category. And conflicts of interest. Boundaries growing, not maintaining appropriate boundaries growing in 2018. So you can find this information, again, Google it, Google that phrase, and it will bring you right to the page. Tells you how the complaints were handled. Some were not eligible. 15 did meet the requirements, and 8 were administered by the independent review board. So let's look at some of the themes, some of the complaints. And I think there are just 8. So my inclination is to go ahead and go through these with you. With your permission, I'll read. I may have the easiest view of this, so I'll read. Complaint 1. The ICF professional allegedly had an intimate relationship with a supervision client. The standards allegedly in breach, 23 and 24. The outcome, the ICF professional was found in breach of standard 24 by the independent review board. The ICF professional and the final review panel co-created a learning plan to help the ICF professional in their learning of this breach. At the time of this writing, the ICF professional is actively working on their learning path. You'll see that in almost all of the results. The MO of the ICF, it's a lot of acronyms. What the ICF prefers to do is a learning plan. Folks who are found in, coaches that are found in violation of an ethical code, let's help them learn. Let's co-design a learning plan. How can you do better? How can you do better rather than penalties? So it's an educational focus rather than a penalty focus. Let's see what the next, the complainant felt there was a misleading of a minor by the ICF professional and a conflict of interest. The standards allegedly in the breach 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 10, 16, 27, and 28. The IRB found the ICF professional in breach of standard 10, and they're addressing a learning plan at this time. The next one, the complainant alleged the ICF professional was inconsistent and discriminatory. Standards allegedly in the breach 3, 4, 5, 13, 16, 25, 26, and 28. In this case, the IRB did not find the ICF professional to be in breach of the ICF Code of Ethics. And again, this is highly redacted. There's no additional information on this, but that was the finding of the board. The next one, the complainant felt that the ICF professional misrepresented their qualifications, was inconsistent, and did not stick to their, what are those words? I can't make that out. Let me clean that off there. Let me get, coaching agreement. They did not stick to their coaching agreement. Loads of standards there. And then the IRB did find that the ICF professional was in breach of standards 1, 10, 17, 21, and 23. This comes from misrepresentation of qualifications. There used to be a question on the frequently asked questions, ethics, I don't know if it's still there, that says, I have a doctorate in marketing. Maybe I do not have a doctorate in marketing. But on my website, I refer to myself as Dr. Kelly. Is that okay? And the answer was no. Because if someone thinks I'm going to hire Dr. Kelly for coaching, but my doctorate is in marketing, I may very well have misrepresented. I still have the doctorate. Not really. I still have the doctorate. But have I misrepresented that? Do you think that I have a PhD in coaching because I use that term in my marketing and in my communication with you? That's an area to be aware of. Let me see. Complaint 5, confidentiality, lacked professionalism, and there was no partnership between the coach and the client. The investigation team uncovered some elements of the complaint that should have been filed through the ICF accreditation complaint process. So it sounds like this was regarding a training program. So just remember that you have that option if you're in a training program to go that route. If it's coaching clients with sponsor, coach, and client, that would be a different venue. They were handled in 2 ways: file the ICF accreditation complaint, and the ethical breaches were reviewed through the ECR process. So in that situation, some of the complaints were handled by one part of the ICF, the others by the ECR. 6, the ICF professional allegedly, this goes to the one before, misrepresenting ourselves, misrepresented themselves on their website and in person. At the time of this writing, this complaint is still being reviewed by the IRB. Give a look though, as we're going through coaching agreements next week, maybe, or before then. Just take a look. Take a look at your website. Take a look at the information that you put out. And are you completely comfortable with how you've represented yourself? I think the vast majority of us are. But just have an eye open to the fact that I may be sounding like I have more to offer, or I have more education, or I have more certification, or I have more training than I actually do. Complaint 7, the complainant allegedly tried to terminate the coaching agreement, but was charged for services not rendered. This is also still being reviewed by the IRB. And that brings me back to another question I imagine they ask. Hello, hi, we're from the ICF, from the IRB. Could we please see your coaching agreement? Could we please see your coaching agreement? I would think that's a question they ask very early on. And of course, that would be written up. If they come to a mediation, you'd want to look at that document. Well, what does our document say about terminating? Oh, it doesn't say anything. Oops. Or it's very specific about the circumstances. And finally, the ICF professional had an alleged intimate relationship with the complainant at the time of the writing. This is still being reviewed by the IRB. I guess it's good, just a reaction from me, that 2 of these involve inappropriate or intimate relationships with a client, because there are people like me who think, come on, really, we don't need to worry about that, right? I mean, we got that, right? We know that. So it's under review. I don't know who these complaints are about, but we can't take anything for granted. We can't take anything for granted there. Let me see where we are. Let's just stop and pause and ask for any questions, thoughts, reactions to what you just saw.
And thanks for going over that. I'm actually curious. First of all, I think just perspective. I think it's fascinating that there's, did you say 53,000 certified coaches, and to have 21 complaints and only 8 that got this far. Just so I guess that begs the question. So does that mean ICF's doing something really, really right with in terms of having this education be available and encouraging it? Number one, and making it part of the process, or is it just that? I mean, why is that? Because that's so low. It's just so low. And then the second thing would be, I'd love to know more about types of conflicts of interest that show up.
Let's do that. Let's find those conflicts of interest. I'm going to go back to what Gurkhan said about the numbers being low. Do people know if they have a problem with me as an ICF professional that they have recourse? Or do they just figure, I said, no, I'm keeping your money, or I'm ending this relationship? Do they know they have recourse? Is that in my agreement, and have I emphasized that with the client? I don't know what the numbers would reflect if everyone knew. That's conjecture, but I thought that Gurkhan, coming from someone who'd been on the independent review board for a long time, I thought that was very interesting, his comment. And then your second one, conflict of interest. Just to prove to you that I don't memorize, if somebody would please find the numbers that relate to conflict of interest, I'll hit those as we go back on the ICF website, and we'll highlight some conflict of interest information. Thank you, Karen.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to get to these scenarios, because I know everybody loves scenarios. Let's get our teeth in that. Let me just see here. What else? Okay. looks like we're in good shape. Let me move to scenarios. So we're gonna shift, and I know 3 hours seems like a long time maybe when you start, and then in the midst of it I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much to cover, but we're kind of hurriedly moving along. And have your ICF Code of Ethics nearby, either electronic or in paper format. Have that nearby, because each of these scenarios will point you to specific standards that you can look at. I'm thinking maybe we'll try this in a big group. How about that? Rather than breakout, so we can all hear each other's thoughts. Okay. We have about 35 minutes, so we'll spend 5-6 minutes on each scenario. I'll see where the energy is, what you're interested in discussing, and when I'm feeling that kind of wane, we'll move on to another scenario. So here is scenario number one, the first one we'll look at. I'd encourage you to jot down those codes on each slide. They're not repeated on the next slide. So this one you might want to look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15 relate to this scenario. So here's what a coach is facing. And I know coaches who have faced this, and I've faced part of it. You have been coaching Sam for 3 months in an organization where HR manages the coaching placements. Recently, you were approached by the HR head and asked to share information to inform Sam's performance review. Okay? Been coaching Sam for 3 months, and now the HR head is asking you to provide information to influence or inform Sam's performance review. The codes to consider: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15. Let me jot those down. 1 through 7 and 15. These are the questions I'd love to hear around this scenario. What are your considerations in responding to HR? Keep in mind, this is the head of HR. You work there, maybe. Head of HR. Huh. How am I going to respond? What are the considerations in responding to the head of HR? What are the implications for your coaching relationship with your client? This is a triangle now. How is that going to change your relationship with your client? And what information in your agreement and the Code of Ethics addresses this scenario? So the floor is open. The floor is open. I'd love to see you, but I'd like to leave these questions up here at least for a minute or two. What are your thoughts? Who'd like to start?
I actually experienced this. Oh, Phyllis, looks like you already did, so go ahead.
Well, Karen, we may have similar experiences. I would actually, and put first and foremost, what is the agreement with the company? Because up front, if you have agreed to share certain information, then that also should have been discussed with the client at the beginning of the coaching engagement, or with the coachee at the beginning of the coaching engagement. So I guess my first question is, are we assuming that maybe this is a bit of a surprise? There hasn't been any prior discussion around this?
I think it's always good to consider a surprise when somebody says, tell me about your client. What? I have had that surprise. Yes.
So with my clients, I take the approach of, with HR or their supervisor, I will share whether or not they're showing up to meetings, whether they're engaged in their own development, from my perspective. but nothing else in terms of the content of the conversations, unless we work that out ahead of time. You know, if we've done any assessments, then the coachee has to be comfortable before the assessments begin with the company having access to them, if that will in fact be the case. Though I usually urge that, like a 360, it's better if it's owned by the coachee, and I encourage them to share it with their boss, but they're not required to, because in my experience, the uptake and the willingness to participate and the willingness to be vulnerable is greater. And usually in the kind of coaching that I do with my clients, I'm also requiring them to go back and talk with people about what they're working on. And we talk about how they can do that, which helps them increase the level of trust and transparency with the folks who gave them feedback on the 360 in the first place.
Thank you, Phyllis. And it sounds like you're speaking the voice of experience in this scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? We had someone else.
So Karen may have some other observations.
Yeah, I'll just share that I have a similar perspective, Phyllis. I don't share either. Confidentiality, it's kind of question of confidentiality is super important to me with my clients. And that's part of the reason that I get retained. Where I'm doing a lot of work. I'm an external coach. I'm not an internal coach. I actually walked away from a deal with a government. I do a lot of work in the government sector. And I walked away from working with a city because the negotiation happened, the contract negotiations happened with the next level down in the HR, within the HR organization. And when the head of HR came back, they were really adamant that they wanted me to disclose what was going on in the coaching conversations. And it was very easy for me to go back and say, here's what we've agreed to. This is what the contract is about. We were trying to negotiate the contract. And there were two points. One was they felt they owned all of my intellectual property. And second, because they're a government entity, so that was their rationale. And the second was that it was my responsibility to disclose what was happening with the coaching relationship. So it's these things actually protect us, and it saved a lot of time. It was like, that was an easy decision. I'm leaving. I would love to have tried to work it out. We tried, but the head of HR was just not going to go anywhere. She was like adamant, this is what we're going to do. And she found somebody who would fulfill that. So it's not my jam.
Karen, thank you, because there's much that goes into a coaching agreement, but roles and responsibilities are a huge part of that.
Yep.
Yeah, and you had that in your agreement. Here's the responsibilities.
I have a very thorough agreement, and it still needs updating, especially in light of ChatGPT and other things that are going on. But yeah, you can't be afraid. It was $100,000 contract, and I walked away.
Thank you.
But it gets to credibility, Karen. So kudos to you for doing that.
Other thoughts, whether you're in HR or not? I mean, I've been contacted directly by a boss. If that's happened to you, if a boss contacts you and says, how's the client doing with the area that I want them to grow in? You can speak to that. Any other thoughts?
This is Susan Howington. I build it into my agreement that we have check-ins with the boss, and usually the VP, the head of HR, is involved in the contract with me. And so and I know most of you, if not all of you, do this. So we have the mid-process meeting where all of the key people are involved, including the client. And then at the end, we have a meeting. And so everybody's sharing and talking about the progress of the coaching as it's going along. And I don't share it. I discuss what does the client want to share with them. So it's not it's not coming from my mouth what's happening with my client. It's coming from his or her mouth. And so I found that that just really helps detour those private calls to me about, hey, is he getting this or not? Or what's going on with him? It's really helpful. And I don't have those. I have not had that kind of situation come up yet. I'm not saying that it won't, but so far, knock on wood, it's not been something I've faced.
Thank you. Knock on wood too.
Yeah, I actually love that, Susan. I too have my agreements actually talk about it. I have lots of agreements with different companies. So if it's a public company or one of my larger clients, we do have the agreement is with the financial sponsor, the manager, and the coachee.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found has been useful is that what you talk to, let the client speak to it. That's part of the responsibility in being able to have this benefit of being coached, and also to do the same thing. There's a pre-check. There's kind of like what are the desired outcomes, and then there's a midway check, and then there's a summary check at the end to be sure that we've accomplished what we agreed to accomplish.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is having the client, they'll learn to speak up and to express, and have the team around them also, because often it's not often, but my experience, it's not always the client who's the problem. It's often the boss or HR or somebody else. I love what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I've experienced that too.
Thank you, Susan. And one of the groups mentioned more, please, about conflict of interest. There are multiple areas where that can show up. This is one. Greg, do you have a question or a comment?
The question addresses what Susan and others have talked about relative to what happens if the client in one of these pre or post check-ins is not verbal about their status in the coaching relationship. So divulges little information, isn't interested in sharing in a public group. Then who owns the responsibility to share? Is that clear?
Not entirely. Greg, is this what you were saying? If my client is a person of few words and their boss wants to know how they're doing, who communicates with the boss? Is that what I heard?
No. If the client is reluctant to share details about what's going on in terms of progress, and the boss or others in this agreement that has already been forged, that you would have a pre or post check-in. What happens if the client doesn't want to share?
With their boss?
Yes.
I do not have an answer to that.
I
Who's had that experience?
have.
Thank you.
So there was an agreement set ahead of time. So in my situation, it was very clear. Everybody was in agreement. So it could be slightly different, Greg. The boss actually overreached in asking for more than what was agreed to. So part of it is we created a coaching plan, and the conversations were specific to whether how the plan was going. So part of it was that in my case, the boss was actually asking more than was part of what we'd agreed to. So and the client though the coachee was pushing back, going but not really speaking up. So that was a coaching opportunity for me to work with the coachee to say, this was something that's happened before, what's going on for you. I didn't judge it or give any information about it at first. I just noticed, and I said, hey, what's happening? I understand that it's outside of what we've agreed to. So what's up for you? Anyway, it was an opportunity to have a coaching conversation and not have a judgment conversation about how they might have been. That's my own assessment, by the way, a judgment conversation about how they were feeling, and they were what they were. And so later finding out that they were feeling not respected. That was the conversation. They were not feeling respected by their boss. And that actually was the breakthrough that opened up about their own communication. They don't always end like that, but I'm just saying the one that I'm remembering, that's what happened. So it was an opportunity. It was kind of like, anyway, it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
Karen, thank you for that example. I heard you staying in the role of coach
Yeah.
in
Absolutely.
that conversation.
Greg, have you actually had that happen in a coaching arrangement or experience with a coachee or a client? Have you actually had that happen?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, I've been in several scenarios where the boss or manager overreached their agreement relative to wanting information.
Mm-hmm.
And in both situations that I'm thinking of, the employee chose in one case to divulge, in the other case not to divulge.
Mm-hmm.
But what was clear was the statement or the reference to the fact that this is outside the bounds of our original agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So now I took it upon myself to make that statement. Maybe I shouldn't have. And I certainly wasn't there to mediate between the employee and the boss and the other members in the room. But I did feel compelled to say this wasn't covered in our agreement.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
I'm loving how much, and I didn't plant this, but I'm loving how much the coaching agreement is,
yeah.
it always does, but I'm loving how much that comes up. I want to see if we can fit in one or two more scenarios, but before I move away from here, any final thoughts on this scenario you'd like to share?
I have one more to share, which is that some of the work I do, I'm coaching global executives, and I'm part of a stable of coaches. Even though I'm an external coach, I'm part of a stable of coaches, and the organization has 100,000 employees, so they need to meet to understand trends and what's happening. So part of my agreement does have that I will speak to trends. I will speak to what I'm noticing across my coaching pool, the people I'm actually, my particular group. And that's what they need to find that out to roll up. They need to find out, or, anyway, whatever they need to find out. So it's a themes. And that's clear also in the contract that that's what will be reported in terms of outside of the actual coachee reporting, that they're going to ask me across all of the clients that I'm coaching, what are the themes, so that they can pay attention to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in your agreement. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. All right.
Well, one last thing on that end. I have many agreements, so so it depends on the client. Not all of my agreements get all of that information, or all of my clients get all that information, because it would be so much overwhelm and overkill for a small private company to have the same. My contracts for my coaching, my large public companies, is like 14 pages. that would cause a private client to run away.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, let's see what we have next here. Oh yeah, this one, I am dedicating this. Where am I? I don't know how I could have so much paper and not have, was it Someone mentioned something earlier and I said I may dedicate something to you. Who was that? You were Jennifer. A scenario. I just found it. All right. Jennifer, this is for you. This is not exactly what you were talking about at all. But I see this and I'm like, oi. It was, I think it was something to do with a group. We were talking about what happens if it goes out to a group. This went to a group, not intentionally, unfortunately. In this scenario, you accidentally sent a recording with notes to the wrong person. Codes to consider: 3, 4, 7, and 14. The wrong person. Hey, have we been there? So this one, the questions are a little bit different. So I've messed up. I sent the recording and notes to the wrong person. So this is about me taking action. What steps will I take to address the situation? Who will I notify? What safeguards will I put in place for the future? So if this has not exactly happened to you, but something similar, maybe put yourself in that place and ask yourself, how did I handle that? What steps did I take? Who did I notify? And then how do I put safeguards in place to make sure this doesn't happen again? Thoughts, sharings?
I'll just chime in since it's about me, right? I'm kidding. Now, I think that maybe many of us have done something like this just in our personal lives. It's kind of like, oops, just by accident, I sent an email out to somebody. Just, reading through 14 in the Code of Ethics. It says, when I become aware of a possible breach of the code by myself, or I recognize unethical behavior in another ICF professional, I respectfully raise the matter with those involved. If this does not resolve the matter, I refer to a formal authority. It says, an example, ICF staff for resolution. I think that just kind of indicates to me that you address it right away, and I would, if it happened to me, I would let each party know what happened. I think I'd be very forthright. I would just lay it out, I made a mistake. I think make apologies in that circumstance, and then maybe even check in with, whoever it was that I accidentally sent this information to, this recording to. I would maybe even ask them, what, if anything, that they would like to do. The hope is that it was just a very simple mistake and could be addressed right away. But my thoughts are that the steps to take would be to address it immediately. And I don't know if I would notify the ICF in that regard. It maybe I would check in and just say, this is what happened, so that I know that for myself as a professional, that I'm being transparent and acknowledging a mistake. The safeguards for the future. Wow, just double, triple check who I'm sending my recorded messages to. But that's just what comes to me off the top of my head.
Thank you, Jennifer. I wrote down a couple of those that, I want to speak to. Others. What do you do after you flatten your forehead? What do you do?
I feel like I've been oversharing, so I don't want to do that. So if I am, just guys, just raise your hand and I'll shut up. I actually have made a practice, because I have done that. I have not recording or notes, but I have not sent the email to the correct person. And so I made a practice, and I still do it today. I do my body of my email and I put the address in after it's done to be sure I've got it to the right place. So just a kind of like proofreading is just a tip, passing it along if it helps.
Thank you.
Karen, I do the same thing, because for whatever reason, it's like somehow that email can slip out and be sent before I'm ready. So I never put the person's email at the top.
Especially a whole reply all or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah,
A companion on that road. Thanks, Susan.
if I could just chime in really quickly, a couple of years ago, I had a client, the exact same name as the other client, and their email address was the exact same, was first and last name at a different domain site. But
Yeah.
oh my gosh, yeah, whenever I would be in contact, I mean, it never happened, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I had to be really mindful of going, oh, which got to look at that email address again. I love that idea about putting the email at the end. That's a brilliant idea, because you have the chance to kind of recheck yourself at the end before hitting that send button. So yeah.
Well, I had my version of this. I do a process I learned at the ACTP I attended, where you clarify your personal values and you meet yourself in 5 years, your future self. So the phrase I use with the clients is, I say, and next time we meet, we'll do that special exercise I mentioned, and you will meet Anne 2028. And great things will happen. So Anne 2028 became a phrase. And I had a bunch of new clients, and they were all doing the same future session. And one of the names just sounded like a bumper sticker. It was just perfect. I'll just say Anne 2028. It just sounded that way. And it was in my head. So I said to Daryl, so Daryl, when you and I do that, you'll meet Anne 2028. And I went, because I don't know if Anne is one of his coworkers. And it was a slip of the tongue. I referred to them by somebody else's name because the phrase was in my head. The reaction from the client in the moment was, don't worry about it. And I think I beat myself up more. But it just, and then if you really want to feel bad, tell your sister who's a clinical psychologist that you called a client by the wrong name. She won't let me forget that. But things like that happen. In a class, I sent a welcome email to everyone. So not confidential information, but information to welcome members of a class. And I sent it to one of the wrong participants, had the same first name, sent that. So most of them are right. One is going, why am I getting this? And now class hasn't even started. And I want to piggyback on what was shared, transparency and act quickly. And I'm not ashamed to say that, shame was pushing me. I thought, I teach ethics. I have to do this right. So I said, okay, I reply all. I apologize to everyone. I am sorry I inadvertently sent our welcome email to someone who did not belong. I apologize for that. I don't have it in front of me, but I acknowledged the mistake and probably said I will do better. Something. But it happens. And thank you for the transparency and act quickly, because that was my opportunity for my class to be transparent and my class to make mistakes, my class to come back and say, I made a mistake. I'm here to set it right. So it was a great learning opportunity, if you like those. Oh, learning opportunity. Let's see if we got time. We do not have time for one more because this is the last slide, and I love this slide. There are gray areas, and that is intentional. There are gray areas, and that is intentional. The title of this module is Ethics Ain't Easy, and why that's good. It's gray. If the answers were black and white, inevitably we would be in a circumstances where we wished we had a little leeway, wouldn't we? My client couldn't make the session on time. I'd like to comp them a session, but I absolutely can't because it says in black and white, I can't do it. I wish there was some leeway. I wish there was some gray. There's a great deal of gray. Code of Ethics is in effect. Hold the gray space. I love the last one. Be okay saying it will depend. It will depend. So I'm going to come back in a moment. I'd like to hear your takeaways if you were here for both of our classes. What are you taking away from the 3 hours of ethics-specific training that you're just about to complete in 8 minutes? If you're here for today, likewise, what are you taking away from today's class? I'd like to hear either verbally or in the chat. There's power in putting that in writing. There's power in saying aloud, I'm going to look further into this, I'm going to do that, or adding that into the chat box. That's a powerful action. While you're thinking of that, I want to offer you each something special for being here today. And that is an opportunity to chat further about your coaching future. One of the board members at Metro DC, my home chapter, says, they were talking about something with credentialing, and they said, we got Ann Kelly. I spend a lot of time helping folks sort through credentialing. So if that's a puzzle for you, or you would appreciate a little clarity around that, and I know I have to do certain things every 3 years, and it involves this and that, and algebra and physics and mentoring and exams, and I'm not quite sure of the rest, CCEs, I am more than happy to chat with you about that. So I will put my address in here. The only thing I ask you to do is make an appointment with me. And if you would do that today, that would help me out a great deal. And if you're listening to the recording, today counts. So, whoops, it chopped off the end of my name. But I'd love to talk with you about 30 minutes, and we get on the ICF website and we look at the path that you are curious about. Maybe you're up applying for the next certification. Maybe you want to renew, maybe you're applying for your certification or just have questions. I'm more than happy to help with that. So I would love to hear from you. 3 hours of ethics training or 90 minutes of ethics training. What are you taking away? I'd like to hear from you verbally or in the chat. Who would like to start? Stephanie.
Yes. Something I'm taking away from both of these classes is that it's not as scary or as looming as it can sound, because ethics sounds really high responsibility. And I like how the ICF, when there is a complaint or some kind of a concern, that they take a learning path, that there are gray areas, that there are coaching, that you can do different coaching agreements for different clients based on the needs and responsibilities. That if you do make a mistake, it's about transparency, it's about honesty, and it's not about getting, punished or kicked out of ICF or losing your accreditation or your credentialing or anything. I like that it is a very fluid yet serious things, and they give you lots of resources and lots of guidance, and I like that.
Thank you, Stephanie. True. Daryl, would you mind occasionally reading a few of the takeaways from the chat?
Sure, I will. I'd be happy to do that. So Phyllis says, terrific discuss. Oh, did someone want to say something? I don't want to. Okay, maybe not. Terrific discussion and sharing of experiences today. I especially appreciate the reminder to be more mindful of recipients when sending information electronically. Putting the email address in last is a great practice. Thank you. And then Jennifer says, a takeaway for me is knowing how supportive the ICF Code of Ethics is for us coaches and how important it is to review them regularly. Karen says, takeaways, the power of a group conversation. That indeed, very much so, Karen. Feeling safe to explore this topic. The generosity of Ann Kelly. The many resources ICF makes available to further the coaching profession. Thank you, she says. Stephanie, well, she mentioned a few moments ago, but had something to share. But I like this thing too about having multiple coaching agreements for different types of clients, depending on their needs and responsibilities. Yeah, I mean, I would never want to give a 14-page coaching agreement to a private client because they'd go like, what on earth? But depending on the situation, you may need that. So I never considered about having multiple coaching agreements. Let's see, learning. Make sure clients know about the ICF standards and they can file a complaint if need be. All right, very good to have that, transparency and openness with their clients. Brenda says, thanks for highlighting the discussions related to HR and sharing themes for larger clients. Jennifer says, talking through the scenarios has been great. Thank you. And Greta says, takeaways, annual ethics report. Who knew? Great resources that Ann shared last week as well. Karen also said that, Stephanie, a good point regarding ICF support. Love the idea of a growth mindset and learning plans for course correction versus punishment. And I just want to add something I put earlier in the chat, is just the openness that some of you have had to be to share some of the situations you've encountered, to be very open about that, because none of us are perfect. We're gonna make a mistake here and then, but simply to be aware of that and letting our clients be aware of that as well is it gives us more credibility as coaches if we go to a client and say, hey, you know what, I kind of made this mistake. I sent something to the wrong person, the other client, John, that I'm working with or whatever. And that's always really, really important because knowing that, being open to share with our clients makes them know that, wow, we are trustworthy, rather than, okay, hopefully they won't find this out. And then, all of a sudden it gets revealed and it's like, wait a second, so, but anyone else want to say anything or share anything or say anything in the chat?
And I will turn things over to you, Daryl. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ann, again, my dear friend. It's so great to have you with us. And yes, I think a round of applause is great for ending this, for all of you who stuck with us to the end for the ethics training here. And of course, be on the lookout. Someone had mentioned earlier to me in a private message that they didn't get the survey from last week. Please reach out to me. If you haven't received that, in fact, I'm going to put my email address in here as well, just in case you, for some reason, didn't have a chance to get last week's. That's my email. I'm, of course, the program director of ICF Orange County. And so it's great to have all of you here. I also put in the chat the link to our upcoming events. Of course, we have the third session with the Ann Kelly trifecta next Tuesday, same time, same place, same face. And again, if you haven't registered, please click on that link for that. We also have other things coming up. In fact, this evening we have our coaches supporting coaches. There's about 15 people signed up for that. And that's a way for us to just work with each other and share various scenarios. I'm not sure what the theme is tonight. I apologize for that. I don't want to get myself distracted and look at the website. And then on the 21st this month, which is our next in-person chapter meeting, Linda Denton, who is an MCC locally here in the Orange County area of Southern California, she's going to be hosting a panel with 2 or 3 other coaches. So if you're able to be here for that in-person meeting, that's not going to be recorded, of course, but if you're able to be there for that, that would be great. Other things coming up, I was just looking at the calendar. We have, well, not in counting today, we have 15 more events between now and the end of the year. Whether that's a book club, whether that's an in-person chapter meeting, a social event at a local pub, restaurant, or bar for our monthly mixer, or whether that's our end of the year celebration that we have our holiday event, or the coaches supporting coaches and other Tuesday sessions. Lots of things to take advantage of here in the ICF Orange County chapter. And again, I want to thank you, Ann, and thank all of you for being part of this today. And it's great to see all of you. And hopefully some of you will be back next week for part 3, or not really part 3, but the third session with Ann with coaching agreements. And of course, that's going to generate, I think, a lot of interest, as we've seen already today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording right now and bid you all a great day.